Thank you, Hannah. Thanks for inviting us to come down here and talk about the oilseed business. And like Hannah said, I'm on a family farm that's been in our family since 1882 and always been a dairy farm. And I purchased the farm in 1978 from my dad and kept the dairy going. And then as years went on, kids went off to college, and instead of growing into a bigger dairy, because we had a nice land base, we decided to get into the organic world. We started, and what changed our mind a little bit is they built a major 4-lane highway right through our farm. So that created big, very efficient fields for larger equipment, and now we had small little fields. And through that whole process, we started doing small scale vegetables in addition to the large scale, and we got into the world of direct marketing, which as an old dairy farmer, and if any of you were into that world, it's a world where you don't get out much, and marketing in your world, in my world I should say, was just making sure that you made sure the yard was plowed when it snowed so that the milkman could get to the milk house. That's all you knew about marketing, and of course that's like nothing. So that was probably our biggest hurdle, although what we had on our farm, we had a smaller, more modern single-story farm, and we repurposed that early on in our vegetable career to do a state-certified kitchen, and we had a food processing license through DATCP as well. So when we started to look at possibilities of doing oil production, we had to look at equipment, what this and that could be. And when I had DATCP come over, because my idea was biofuel. I was big into, what oilseed makes the most oil, and let's start cranking that out. And my daughter had been going to college and learning, about that. So she was encouraging me, and to DATCP's, to bring them into this picture, they said to me, well, Dale, there's really no difference in making crushing for oil for the biofuel industry or making food grade. So when you do the economics of that, food grade is much higher than biofuel. So that was our focus. And then it was about, what seed do we look at? And I had the opportunity to go out to the northwest part of the country, out to Portland, Oregon, where there were some farm shows out there. And they were doing a lot of work with, and what Russ was going to talk about, I believe, is camelina and some other oilseed crops. And I talked to some guys out there that have been crushing that and doing that, and got some really good advice. And camelina, and I don't want to steal Russ's thunder, but camelina is a dryland crop. There would be some issues growing it here in Wisconsin, not that you can't. I had a friend that tried some just south of Green Bay. It didn't turn out well, and that's only because of weather. It grew well, but it needs a really long window of dry harvest time in fall. So anyway, the guy out in Oregon finally put his hand on my shoulder and said, don't overthink this, Dale, do sunflowers. And when you look at the history of sunflower was the major oil crop for a long, long time, and especially here in the upper Midwest, as late as I believe it was the mid-70s, sunflowers were making their way across the Dakotas, which still where most of them are grown here, into Minnesota. And then by the mid-70s, the advent of soybeans came, and that kind of took over the oilseed market and receded a bit. Now, when we got started into this, we talked to the National Sunflower Association, and they were puzzled that they didn't even know that, well, do sunflowers grow in Wisconsin? Well, that was, so that was a hurdle there. But they do very well. They actually do very, very well. And they're conducive to, they're an easy crop to plant and harvest because you use the same equipment that you use for corn and soybeans. So it's a very easy crop that way. And it's a shorter growing season. So you generally, if you get them planted in that late May kind of thing, by sometime in September you get them off. So kind of before the major rush of the corn and bean, the harvest. So most of our growers are here in Wisconsin. The best yields come from southern Wisconsin, to be brutally honest. I've learned from early on that, excuse me, that growing them near Lake Michigan, you're rolling the dice. They'll do well, but once again, you have that humidity and that moisture coming off the lake. And so we prefer to use or to contract with farmers more away from the lake and south, although we've got some farmers in northwest Wisconsin that do a really, really good job. So, so we got into sunflowers, but more specifically, the variety that we have all of our farmers plant is high oleic. That's a relatively new variety of sunflower seeds. Research is still coming out on these high oleic varieties of oilseeds. Their oil profile is a monounsaturated fat. According to scientists, doctors, researchers, whatever it is, that's probably the healthiest cooking oil that you can use. Now, there's a lot of other uses for it as well. Cosmetically, we have some accounts in that world too, but for the most part, it's a very, very heart healthy, and now the FDA has even in the last couple of years come out and said that we can make that claim. So we're excited about that, but that was one of the biggest reasons why we wanted to do. I've been kind of in a natural health world for 45 years, and you gotta kind of grow what keeps people healthy too, They gotta have a purpose. But it's seed development, seed, and I wish Russ would be here. Just a little backdrop. I know Russ from a project that we did with University of Minnesota Morris probably 10 years ago. We did a project with them with a different variety. It was I believe it was in the mustard family. That it was a South American seed that they got to grow up here in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and one of our growers decided to take on the project, and we crushed a little bit of this oil. It was going to be for a cosmetic thing. We actually were working with a very well-known organic cosmetic company out in Minneapolis area, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of he would tell you more. Well, I think he could tell you about that, about the genetics and all that. But that's how I know Russ. So it would be nice to. I hope Hannah, he eventually shows up. Yeah, just keep doing this. I'll keep talking, and if he does come up, we'll, But so that's how I know him. But the health benefits of these high oleic, especially high oleic sunflowers. I know there's a push in the soybean industry to get a higher oleic, because they're more of it's a mid oleic oil, and the processing does some severe damage to it in the food game. So a lot of chip manufacturing is now turning to sunflower, canola as well. But canola is not a high oleic variety. Some of our tests have come back as high as 88% oleic acid, which is incredible for high heat cooking. like if you're frying or anything like that. And anecdotally, and I love to tell anecdotal stories because I believe, I believe in that. So who doesn't love French fries, right? So you go out to eat, you have French fries, and it gave me indigestion to no end. So when we got going on this, I decided, well, I'm gonna try this. So I made myself, our homegrown potatoes, of course, cut them and did the whole thing so that, eating good organic potatoes. But anyway, I fried them in our oil, and I made the biggest plate of French fries you've ever seen in your life. And I said, I'm gonna eat until I get sick, because I wanna see what they will do, right? And I ate the whole damn plate, and I'm telling you, I felt perfect. So that's when I knew that we're onto something, and I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a researcher, but it's like, man, if it works for me, But the science is really catching up to these high oleic oils and what they do. We do, like I said, we do some work with cosmetic people. My daughter actually she's a formulating chemist at a company in Green Bay, and she also does a little bit of she makes her own soaps and lotions and all kinds of stuff, and she said this oil is just fabulous for that. So a lot of benefits of it, and I think, moving forward that, you're going to see a lot more growth in this. Presently, the seed, to get organic seed is probably going to be really tough. Even now, I talked to our seed dealer and it's sold out. There is none. But the organic certifiers understand this, and because of the lack of availability, they do allow non-GMO, which there are no GMO sunflowers at all. Monsanto sold off their sunflower operation several years ago, because they couldn't manipulate it. And the reason they couldn't manipulate it is because I've been told, and once again, I wish Russ would be here to discuss this.
I think we might have figured out what the issue
Okay.
is. He's USDA. UW-Madison does not let USDA people into our Zoom. So I think we might be able, oftentimes there's an issue. I don't know what that signals, but we're trying a different thing with him sending us the link, which is what we've typically done with our USDA collaborators. I think we might have it figured out.
But keep going.
But we can have discussion too. I don't want to put you on the spot if there's any questions from anybody.
And what I've been told is that there are, there's parental seed stock when there's hybrid, because this is a hybrid sunflower to the nth degree. There are, I've been told, 12 sets of parental seed stocks that go into the development of this hybrid, and it must be. There's only certain parts, and I know this probably expands, of places in the world that this can be developed. And certain parts of California, I've been told, Hawaii has done some development. And now I'm hearing some places in South America, I don't know, but that's the only places where they develop. Can we take questions and stuff now?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Margaret.
Well, it doesn't come back true.
No, I know, it'd be an F2, but I'm just, you guys, how weedy does it present?
It can be a weed, there's no doubt. If you do a really good job of harvesting, and these machines nowadays, these combines do, but you gotta have a special head that harvests them very gently and brings them into the cylinder. There is really very little shatter. And I will say this, if you do drop any appreciable amount, because where we unload, you always spill a few. The birds love us. They're everywhere, and I mean from wild turkeys coming out of the woods near our facility to songbirds, ornamental bird, whatever you want to call them, we have birds everywhere. And if they're dropped in the field, birds are gonna chew them up pretty quick. Yeah, go ahead.
So two quick ones. So since you have to buy the seed stock, what's the cost? And do you work with any of your producers to give them the soy meal, or I'm sorry, not soy meal, the sunflower meal back? I grow sunflowers, but for sunflower meal, actually the oil is a waste product. I know it's
Well, we'll take that waste product from you if you don't mind.
No problem.
so the cost of the ability to meal back.
We actually do, the way I started the company on a shoestring, I went to some of my, because I also work in the organic dairy world. I work for Westby Cooperative. And so I knew, a lot of the dairy guys. And I've been an organic guy for, 8 years, whatever. Worked in organic certification, so I know most of the guys around. So I went to one of my bigger organic farmers just north of our facility, and I laid out a plan by which they would grow for me, and I would, they'd deliver the seeds, and they would get the weight that they delivered to me back in meal. Now, understanding that I extracted, but I had other growers that would fill in that gap. And it was kind of an interesting business model, but we made it work. We don't do that now, but we do sell a lot of meal to a lot of different people. So you feed the meal?
Yeah, without nerding, if you're making chicken meal without soy, or chicken feed without soy, is the way to raise the goats. Could be first.
We sell to a lot of chicken people, yeah. But, yeah, that's how I started, because then you don't exchange a lot of money, you're exchanging weight, and they were close enough that we could shuttle it up there, and initially in totes. Did a lot of crazy things through the years, but yeah.
And then did you say the price of the seed then?
I'm sorry?
The price of the seed?
The price of seed, for these high oleic varieties, it's gonna run you around $20 an acre. Seed costs, you plant about 22,000 per acre, 24,000 maybe at the most, depending on, what you know about your farm. You don't want to get them too close because they have a big head. A bag of seed will plant anywhere from 9-10 acres, something like that. I think there's 220,000 in a bag. So, 9 acres, 10 acres. And the cost is, what'd I say, about $20 an acre. So yeah, seed cost, the bag of the seed is probably $400 or $500. Yeah.
Your yield per acre, pounds per acre, what can be expected?
Boy, that's a great question, because one of the guys that I talked to early on, I think he might have been from one of the big boys, SunOpta or one of them. He said to me, the reason that the North and South Dakota grow these things is because they'll grow on a rock pile. They will grow on almost no topsoil. These things are amazing. Now, are they going to yield like they do in southern Wisconsin? Let me tell you the variant. This is from our experience. We've had guys on, I'll say, poorer soil. They do like it a little bit dry. Bring maybe 500 to 800 pounds in per acre. And our largest grower, who I don't see here in the room, he brought us about 2,500 to 2,600 pounds per acre in 1 year. And that is, I think that Sandy, am I pretty close there with those numbers? Because you guys can go down there, you guys can grow well over a ton an acre. But it does vary that much. But they are very adaptable. What this other guy initially told me is that one thing about sunflowers, you will always get a crop. So that's why they're growing out in the Dakotas on sketcy land, so to speak. Yes?
Crop insurance, is it available for organic growers?
Is that, so no, Sandy, that's not available?
I guess the answer is just no, so I
So-
don't hand the microphone.
So that's only because there's not a base. There's not a base of, gotcha, yeah.
All right, I think-
Oil, but oilseeds federally are, there's crop insurance on like the guys in the Dakotas and Kansas and those areas can, it's just that okay.
Hannah, are we good to transition? Okay, and the issue, most likely, if UW gives a Zoom link to USDA people, they can't log on. So, after figuring that out, I think we got it.
We got it?
All right, Russ, it's all you when you're ready to go. And your slides are showing just fine, but you are muted.
Oh, okay, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Are the slides on presentation mode?
I'd like to see that.
How do you do that?
If you go to the bottom.
There's Russ.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, now does it come?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I did that before, whatever. Sorry for all the confusion and problems. And I apologize, I'd much rather be there in person than doing this via Zoom to begin with. But best laid plans, I ended up getting sick the other day, or a couple of days ago. So I tried my best to bail out, so I wouldn't get you guys sick. So anyway, thank you all for your patience. And again, sorry for the technical confusion and all. But yes, my name is Russ Gesch. I am a Research Plant Physiologist with USDA-ARS in Morris, Minnesota. And I've worked on new and alternative oilseed crops for a number of years. And today I'm going to go through this very fast. So if you have questions, write them down, be thinking about them, and maybe we can discuss things later. But I just wanted to share with you today some of the work that we're doing with integrating winter annual oilseed crops, in this case winter camelina and pennycress, into our summer annual cropping systems in the upper Midwest. In double and relay cropping scenarios, which I'll talk about here more in just a little bit. We've been primarily developing these best management practices for this system, for conventional systems, but it does have very good potential, as I'll show you later, for organic systems, and we actually have done this organically as well. So I'll talk more about that here in a minute. But just to familiarize you, some may not be familiar with camelina and pennycress. Both belong to the mustard family, so they're related to canola. And there are both winter and spring annual forms. Camelina, a lot of people are familiar with that because most of the work that's been done in the United States has been done on spring forms. But there are true winter annual types too, and that's what we're using in the cropping system that I'm talking about. Both are very extremely freeze hardy, relatively high yielding, high oil content. Camelina, particularly the winter types, they're both winter camelina and pennycress, a very small seed. But winter camelina typically has an oil content of around 40 to 42%, so very high oil content. And both camelina particularly, it has been grown as a commercial crop over in Europe for hundreds of years actually, but it's relatively new in the United States. And we're primarily developing it for industrial purposes, biofuels, bioproducts, and so on, but it can be used as a food oil as well. It's high in unsaturated fatty acids, particularly oleic, oleic acid, but it also is very high in vitamin E, which is an antioxidant, kaffir, and so it helps stabilize those unsaturated fatty acids and has better shelf life than, for instance, flax in that regard. Pennycress, I'm going to talk just a little bit about pennycress because a lot of people probably aren't familiar. Farmers are familiar with it as a weed and often referred to as stinkweed for a very good reason. It doesn't smell very good. But there has been a lot of domestication work done on pennycress, and it shares the same agronomic characteristics as winter camelina. But over the past decade, there's been a huge effort made and highly successful in domesticating pennycress. I work closely with the University of Minnesota. They have a breeding program there. And also, we've been working with Illinois State and Western Illinois State University as well. And they've developed lines of pennycress now that even have edible oil profile, are low in glucosinolates, which causes that sting, if you will. And so there are truly some good agronomic varieties that are coming down the pipe. And I work closely with those groups to test some of those out in the field as an agronomic crop. These systems that I'll be talking about dealt with relay cropping. Yeah, I already mentioned, both are primarily being developed for industrial use as biofuels, particularly jet fuel. Camelina has been used for that already. Bioplastics, we're working with some companies, for instance, PepsiCo is very interested in the bioplastic aspect of using these oils. But as I mentioned, it can be used for cooking oil. Camelina is used in pet food supplements. There's one in this picture here, which is equine pet supplement. It sells for like $84 a gallon. So, and I know organic growers are good at marketing things. I think there's good potential for camelina oil. Even companies like General Mills are very interested in the protein from the seed meal. And seed meal camelina, both winter and spring camelina, is USDA approved for use in feed. I think up to 10% ration or in the ration for swine, poultry, and it's used for aquaculture. And I believe for beef cattle as well. I meant to check on that. I forgot to. Well, one of the, few of the reasons why I'm working on this, number one is to add new economic opportunities for farmers, but also to give some environmental benefits as well. We often refer to camelina and pennycress as cash cover crops, because as I'll show you here in a little bit, they have some of the same benefits as other cover crops environmentally, but can be harvested through seed, obviously, so that's why we use the term cash cover crop. But of course, part of the reason for doing this is to try to diversify cropping systems in the upper Midwest, which are primarily summer annual systems, mostly corn and soybean, with some small grains grown as well. And because of that, we have this period of time from the time that the summer crop is harvested in the fall till the next crop is seeded and growing the next summer, where there's a long period of time that the soil is bare, no living cover on it. A lot of farmers now are using conservation fill methods and more no-till is cropping up, particularly out by us. But still, there are often places living cover there. And the system that I'll be talking about with using the winter oilseeds, we can keep living cover on there for almost year-round. This, of course, has led to some unintended consequences, which we're trying to help mitigate by using this systems as well. With the simplified rotations that we've been using, intense management, of course, pest resistance is becoming a bigger problem. We see insect-resistant weeds, more persistent diseases, insect pests, and so on. Soil erosion is still a problem. This picture that you see here in the slide, that was taken only a couple years ago out by us. So we still have problems with soil erosion, and of course reduced water quality from unwanted loss of nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus as well. And not just the dead zone of development, we have to refer to that. But, for instance, out by me in western Minnesota, southern Minnesota, the nitrate nitrogen concentration in drinking wells is becoming above that the EPA recommends. Shouldn't be drinking. Because it's not safe, 10 parts per million and higher. So that is an issue. And a lot of that nitrogen, unfortunately, is coming from agricultural systems. Well, the way we're using these winter oilseeds, winter camelina and pennycress, as I mentioned, is in double relay cropping systems. They both have relatively short life cycles. They're very freeze hardy, they survive our winters, but we're also able to harvest them very early, which allows us opportunities to double crop, to grow a second crop. The system that has worked economically, that has worked the best for us this far north, has been the relay crop, soybean, winter camelina, so that's what I'm keying in on here, although I'm going to be talking about some double cropping work that we're doing with sunflower and other crops as well. Double cropping, of course, is you grow your first crop, you harvest it immediately, seed and root, crop and harvest that later. With relay cropping, the reason it's called relay cropping is because we're overlapping the life cycle of the two crops. So the system, what we call the gold star system that's worked best today, is to come in with our winter oil seeds, in this case winter camelina, after a relatively short season summer crop. And spring wheat has worked very well, other small grains will work. Silage corn, which is taken up relatively early and doesn't leave a lot of residue, has worked well also. We come in here, we plant the direct drillings work best for oil seeds. It can be broadcast, but direct drillings work best, especially for the relay cropping system. And then they overwinter well. The next spring, we come in, and in the next picture over on top, we drill soybean in between rows of winter camelina. And winter camelina and pennycress do mature rather rapidly. They are small seeded. So once they begin to mature, they mature rapidly. Camelina, for instance, is usually ready to harvest by late June or early July. And pennycress even a little bit, usually a week earlier than that, 2 weeks earlier. And we can come over to the top of that soybean, harvesting camelina without damaging the soybean, and then that soybean, of course, we're harvesting later when it's ready. So it can be thought of as a sustainable intensification process. You know, we're producing 2 crops in a single year, or 3 crops in 2 years, and keeping, you know, living cover nearly year-round on the landscape, which is very important. And it's not just proof of concept. We have done this on large acreages as well. This is a farm in North Dakota during 2019, where the farmer relay crop soybean with winter camelina here about 80 acres, and was quite successful. And this, by the way, was on a piece of ground that was no-till. I think it was no-till for, I think he said 30 years, 20 to 30 years. And there were virtually no weeds. He never used any herbicide here. And the camelina did a great job of suppressing weeds, which I'll talk about here in a minute. And we've also, I mentioned, we have done this organically as well. This particular study we did in collaboration with the University of Minnesota, West Central Research and Outreach Center in Morris. And they were primarily interested, USDA is the scientist there, swine specialist. And she wanted to look at feeding organically grown winter camelina to organic swine. So we're more interested in the feeding aspect than we're in the production aspect of it. But one of the things that we found with this, and the university was quite impressed with there at WC-Rock, is that winter camelina did a great job of suppressing winter annual early summer season weeds. And you can see in the picture to the far right here on this slide, where there were gaps in the camelina, you can see, there were weeds coming. But where we had good stands of camelina, the weed suppression was really good. And so Yushi in her studies was using winter camelina after it had been pressed for oil, was using seed meal to feed the swine. And that worked well, I want to say it was between 10 and 15%, I believe. Meat quality was good, weight gain was good, but if you got much more than that, then weight gain started to drop off, even though meat quality was still fine. And there's a few papers that we published on this. One of the things that we've consistently been able to see, am I doing okay for time?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So one of the things we consistently see with this relay cropping system, even with the double cropping, is that by producing the 2 crops, in this case I'm showing a full season crop of soybean compared to related soybean with camelina. If you add up those yields, total seed yield tends to be more in the relay system than just growing a single crop of soybean. And most importantly too is that there's a lot more oil per acre produced growing both crops than growing just a single crop of soybean. There is some yield drag in the relay system, but we've been able to overcome some of that. We're working with the University of Minnesota Minnesota to find cultivars of soybean that work the best in the system. And it turns out there are some that work better than others. But we do tend to see a little bit of yield lag with the real wet soybean compared to the commodity crop soybean. But again, adding both camelina and soybean up tends to be more than just a single crop of soybean and more oil growers. I mentioned double cropping. So we are looking at, in this particular study that was just started last year, or actually the camelina was planted in fall of 21. Last year was the first year for collecting data on the double crops. We're looking at we used an earlier variety of winter camelina. The university also has a breeding program for winter camelina, and we have a line that's about a week and a half earlier than the one we have been using. So we're actually harvesting that, and then we're growing sunflower. It's an early variety from New Seed, rather. I don't think it's been released yet, but it's an early variety of sunflower that's does very well in the system, although we do see a little bit of yield reduction to that. And dry bean and millet work very well in the double crop system, where we're harvesting the camelina and then growing those as the second crop afterwards. And then the graph to the right here just shows that, again, adding up in the double crop system, adding up the yield of winter camelina seed and our double crop, we tend to get greater seed yield than just growing the single crop. It was much greater, of course, for dry bean and millet than it was for sunflower. But the sunflower, even though there was last year 20% reduction in yield, the oil quality was good and oil content was good as well. And you can see the difference in planting date between the monocrops, which the monocrop is, there was no camelina planted before it, right? So it's just fallow soil going in with the monocrop, and double crops were after harvesting the camelina. So just a little bit about ecosystem services, some of these environmental benefits. One of them that we see is that pennycress and winter camelina, like winter rye, over winter, survive the winter. They do a great job at picking up excess nitrogen left behind by the previous crop, especially in the spring. That's when they shine the greatest. In this particular graph here that's in the middle, this is nitrate nitrogen concentrations from water that's collected, soil water that's collected with suction cup lysimers and accumulated over the spring period. And what it's showing is that there's less of that nitrate nitrogen in the soil water where we have winter camelina, pennycress, winter camelina, or winter rye, pennycress, winter camelina growth, compared to a business as usual fallow soil system. So that means that there's less likelihood for that nitrogen to leach or to get caught up in runoff and lose it, where it can then become polluted. And then the pictures on the far right are pretty self-explanatory. In the upper picture there, those are samples, water runoff samples that were taken after it's raining in the spring. And where it's lighter, there's just less soil particles there. And with pennycress and camelina, it's much lighter, as you can see, compared to a no-till system after rains in the spring, or after a rain in the spring. And then the picture below shows soil erosion on the right there that's occurring. That's a plot right next to the one where winter camelina was grown and kept the soil in place a lot better. And one of the things that I wanted you guys to see for sure is, and that I'm very excited about in terms of potentially using organically, is that both camelina and pennycress do a very good job at suppressing early summer weeds and winter annuals. We've shown this, we've published this, and in this particular study here, no herbicide was used with that winter camelina. And you can see compared to the check plots on either side, there's no weeds there, and lots of weeds in the check plots. But they do a great job at suppressing weeds. And another important thing is that they both flower very early in the spring, when there's very little else out on the landscape flowering. And so they provide a source of pollen and nectar for pollinators, domestic honeybees, which are coming back to the Midwest in the spring, and also native bees that are coming out of hibernation. you know, there's very little out there other than maybe some dandelions and getting pretty good at even controlling those now. So you don't see as many of those in them either. But winter camelina and pennycress flower very early and can provide a good source of pollen and nectar for bees early in the spring. And I just this is my last slide, I just threw this up here because one of the things, we do have a commercial piloting experiment going on right now with farmers in Minnesota and Iowa. And these are crops that we've followed with winter camelina. And so we know they will work well for planting camelina after harvesting those crops. But spring wheat's kind of a crop of choice, and we've been targeting growers of small grains, particularly spring wheat, and they tend to be very interested in the system and oftentimes grow soybean as well. So that's kind of what we've been targeting. But yeah, and I think with that, that's my last slide.